This week, we're talking Quiet on Set, the documentary, Homicide New York, and the series finale of Curb Your Enthusiasm. And now your host, it's me, Mike Indeglio. What is up, team? Welcome to K&M Geekly. This is Mike Indeglio, and this is just a sneak peek at this one geek and some of the things that have gotten him through the week and getting him through this week. I am by myself today. It was a long weekend, a long WrestleMania weekend, and we are going to do a WrestleMania recap and post-mortem, if you will, with myself and Keith Varney and my brother, Dr. Nick. But Keith, because he has to be up in Vermont, he's house sitting for his folks this week, I believe. He's actually on a delay. He hasn't watched Mania yet, or Night 2, so he's going to be catching up. And later this week or next week, we'll be doing our WrestleMania sort of recap. So if you're into wrestling and you're interested in our thoughts on the show, we're going to talk about it from a wrestling perspective, from a performance perspective, and just all kinds of angles. It's going to be a fun little chat. So that'll be next week. So either tune in or tune out, depending. This week, I didn't want a week to go by without talking a few things. Nick is taking the day off. We're all taking the day off to check out the eclipse here in Pennsylvania. And up in Vermont, Keith's going to be getting close to 95+% totality. Here in Pennsylvania, we're getting 91 or 92. So far, it's not so cloudy here. It's a nice kind of sunny day, so we should be able to see the eclipsing take place. I'll be an old man the next time there's another one. So CEO Jen and I are going to go out and check it out. So I hope you all take the opportunity to do so. So there's a couple of things I've been watching this week that have been really interesting that I want to share with you, because I've been enjoying them quite heavily, and I wanted to pass them your way. The first is a documentary I checked out on Max. I know it's also available on Discovery Plus and a couple of other places. It is called Quiet on Set, The Dark Side of Kids TV. It is a 5-part documentary series. It's really 4 parts, and then sort of the 5th episode is a sort of live interview situation. It details some of the behind-the-scenes from Wikipedia. Details some of the behind-the-scenes world at children's television programs in the late 90s to the early 2000s, focusing on Dan Schneider's tenure as producer and showrunner at Nickelodeon. Basically, is discussing some of the toxic behavior that took place while filming these shows, especially as Dan Schneider was the head of showrunner for Nickelodeon, as well as 2 very specifically documented cases of pedophilia and sexual abuse that took place with multiple victims, one very high-profile victim, and those are very salacious, and those are very detailed and hard to kind of reckon with. But the show really encapsulates sort of a different story. So the first thing I'll say, as far as the sort of documentary of it all, it is good. I would say if the needle of pure investigative journalism is at the 50 mark, this one probably moves the needle to the right slightly on the, I don't want to say gotcha, because it's not, I don't think any of it is invalid or unfair, but it definitely hypes up the salacious energy and does not feel particularly even-handed, I would say. Now, that's understandable, as it is very aggravating crimes that took place and atmosphere on these sets, so I understand the tenor, but I would say it's definitely not a down-the-middle type documentary. That said, a lot of the allegations and outcomes of proven, fully run court cases are really harrowing, and I think that this issue of toxic behavior on set by showrunners, especially in shows and on channels and properties that are in high stress, high tempo production, are not uncommon. And it is great to get it to expose an audience to what that can be. I mean, even the best of circumstances, there are toxic people embedded in production that are troublesome. And they don't have to be the particular offenders or abusers of certain acts to be the focus of ire or investigation. I think people who create an atmosphere of toxicity or allow types of content that maybe could go either way If it becomes a habit over a long period of time, I think it can lead to more disastrous effects. So all of that, as bad as it is compounded and worse when we're talking about children's television. And what this really kind of focused for me, obviously, when a lot of this program came out, I was a kid, or I guess a teenager, or a little bit older. But a lot of the comedy that you see as just sort of gross out gags, when viewed through an adult lens, being written by adults with potentially innuendo-ish, if not full-on sexual content, being then not even watered down, just inserted directly into children's programming, with the effect of it'll go over most people's heads, kids' heads, but the adults will find it funny. That's gross enough. But if the intent, and what they try to show here, and I think pretty effectively, is that the intent wasn't even to like reach the adults who are watching with kids. It was just because the writers, or this particular writer, thought it was funny and wanted to see if they could get around the censors and get it into the show. And so that's pretty gross. And a lot of the behavior shown is pretty gross and pretty toxic. But really here, what stood out to me is this sort of implicit imbalance between power imbalance between children and their adult caretakers, guardians, who have no understanding or real footing legally or understanding of just sort of this business, being thrown a lifeline to say, hey, here's a future or here's an in to this industry. And so it's very clear why you would fall into potentially toxic or unfair business practices, be them legal, be them contractual, be them just how you should be treated on set. And a lot of these kids find themselves in really toxic, overworked situations and the effects, be them depression or be them whatever they may end up being, if not actually assault, but just sort of the mental abuse of this type of behavior, toxicity, they might not even recognize till much later. And, then so it starts sort of there and then trickles down to get more specific into some of the assault allegations and assault convictions, and then how some of these people ended up back on air and back working in production, and just really, really crazy and disturbing turn of events. And this was at the height of Nick and at the height of the popularity of this programming. And I think it was maybe a year ago, less than a year ago, there was a documentary about 90s television for kids, teens, and tweens that I really enjoyed and really sort of played on my nostalgia. And this is the other side of that. And this is eye-opening, and it definitely colors a lot of my fun nostalgia of that period of time. And that is sad, but sad doesn't mean you close your eyes and look the other way. And so it is worth watching this. It is worth reckoning with it because it's harrowing, as I said. Totally worth a watch. I'm interested in your thoughts on it if you've watched it or if you check it out on this recommendation. So that's Quiet on the Set, The Dark Side of Kids TV. There's 5 episodes. You can check them all streaming on Max, and I believe the Investigation Discovery Plus streaming thing. The other thing I want to mention, y'all know I'm a true crime junkie. Very cool show right now from producer and creator Dick Wolf, who does all of the Law and Orders. It's called Homicide New York. That might sound familiar, but this is not a network property. This is on Netflix. It is I believe there are 5 episodes. There may be 6, but I believe it's 5 episodes. They are different stories, all following cold cases, homicide cases in New York City. And the cast are various detectives, prosecutors, and investigators who were working for NYPD Homicide at the time in the 90s, in the early 2000s, some today, some retired. and it is filmed fully cinematic with incredible first-person documentary evidence, which I love. Also, talking heads, which are shot beautifully, really slick and elegant. They got really charismatic detectives and investigators who were working on these cases. They have family members who have, who were with the victims and whose lives have been altered because of these events. I think it's told the pacing is very well done. The stories are interesting. They don't always tease them out as mysteries. Sometimes you know what happened very early on, and it's about the difference between knowing who did it and putting a case together, and how sometimes that can take decades, and how evidence and investigation practices and science has changed over the years. Really awesome. I'm really enjoying it. I can't recommend it high enough. They're about hour episodes. It's beautiful. It's heartbreaking in some ways and sometimes, and like I said, they're really compelling. Everyone they talk to is really compelling. So there hasn't been a dud in the bunch. Definitely worth a check if you're even remotely into this type of thing. This is Homicide New York. It's streaming on Netflix now. Lastly, Curb Your Enthusiasm. Last night, shut down shop. We got the series finale of one of the seminal comedic properties of my life. I have loved all 12 seasons of Curb Your Enthusiasm. It started way back in the year 2000. So that is a span of 24 years that we have, he took lots of time off and big gaps between seasons, but it's back. This last season, I would say I had no less than 5 to 10 just laugh out loud, bust my sides, funny moments. The comedy, a lot of people have tired of the comedy. I think it's the same. We've talked about this. I was talking with a friend not recently about It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia and Seinfeld and a couple of other shows where sometimes the humor can be turn off some people because it's mean-spirited. But I always felt that Larry David always walks the line of not celebrating the ill behavior, but sort of condemning it comedically. And I think this season is a home run as well. The finale itself, there are so many Easter eggs. There are so many callbacks. It plays out very similarly the whole season has been setting up basically a almost one-to-one recreation of the Seinfeld finale, which was generally panned and it's sort of a meme how Larry David, who came back to write it, was lambasted for ruining it. This basically sets it up to repeat itself, and then there are there are Easter eggs that call back to all 12 seasons of Curb Your Enthusiasm. There are references and callbacks to Seinfeld, its run, its characters, its finale. There are deep Easter eggs as to, I don't want to give away, but there have been Curb Your Enthusiasm led to the removal of a conviction of a murder charge. Google that. There's a documentary on it, a short documentary, which is really fascinating. There's a kind of an Easter egg about that. It's really well thought out. He really knew he had to thread the needle here, and I think he did. I think it's probably the best episode of the season. I think the season itself is a high watermark. I loved it. JB Smoove specifically this season really outdoes himself. I think there's a good send-off for all of the characters for the most part. I think we get to see Richard Lewis. I was so glad that Larry included him so heavily in this last season. It's a great way to say goodbye to Richard Lewis. Just a really great finale. It's nice when something that's so important and so well done to actually stick the landing. And I think it did stick the landing. It doesn't do anything that's ridiculous, like that is world changing, but it is definitely a great finale. With Curb Your Enthusiasm, it can always come back, but this does feel like the official series finale. So Larry David goes out on a high watermark. So there you go. That is our brief Geekly this week. Lots of other fun stuff to check out. there's a movie, Civil War, comes out this week. It's an A24 joint that I'm really looking forward to. I'm gonna go see that. So we'll talk about that. We'll also talk WrestleMania. I believe we'll either drop that episode next week or we'll try to get it as a bonus this week for y'all. For the few subscribers we have, hopefully we can get more. If you are liking Geekly or you have just found us through the algorithm, make sure you subscribe. Let somebody know. Tell a friend. If not, hey, just us friends. If you have a moment, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/K&M. And also we have a whole bunch of Star Trek content over on our main channel. You can check that on YouTube. There is a link below. All right, kids. Until next time, please remember, don't let anyone else yuck your yum. Keep on doing the things you find fun. And of course, until we meet again, keep on geeking on.